Hey everybody, today we are debating whether or not there is evidence for creationism, and we're starting right now. Hey everybody, thrilled to have you here. Oh man, it seems like it's been a long time already. I'm like just wishing to get back to this, and I am stoked for tonight's special debate as we have two experienced debaters. Both of these guys have debated a lot, not just on modern day debate, but also on other channels and other places. So today is going to be especially epic. We are going to debate only the issue of creationism. So this won't actually be like a challenge of who's got more evidence they can provide, creationist or evolutionist. It's going to be just, hey, creationist, what do you got? And we're going to critique it. We'll see if it stands up after the critique. So, with that, I am thrilled to introduce these debaters. Standing for Truth has his link in the description below, and we'll give Standing just maybe a couple sentences if you want to share, Standing, what you've been up to at your channel. We appreciate you coming back, and so the floor is yours if you'd like to share about different projects that you've been working on as of late.
Well, thanks so much, James, for having me on, and thanks so much for the real James for joining me in this debate. The usual on my channel, I got a few series going on that people seem to be enjoying. Hosting some debates of my own. For example, I had Ken Hovind on last week with another couple planned in the next month or so. So if you guys like discussions, debates, just I guess random videos on creation, evolution, and the Bible, please subscribe to my channel. I think there's a lot of fun to come. Thanks, James.
Thank you. Thrilled to have you. And Jim Majors, who has helped out. Wait, by the way, can I just do a quick, I can't thank everybody because we'd be here all night. But I've got to say, one, in addition to thanking Standing for Truth for coming on, thanks to Jim Majors for coming on. Thanks to Jim Majors also for moderating for me when I was buried and dying. He has been just a super competent moderator, and that's to say the least. I think he's done superb. But also, want to say, Colorado Biker Prepper, if you guys see him in the live chat, he donated a computer that we're working on getting it set up. We just have to clear the hard drive, but basically it's going to help us put out better video. So we're really thankful for that. We're also thankful for, I could go on and on and on. So we're going to come back to the thank you so I can let Jim introduce himself. But I just want to say I honestly am blown away by everybody's kindness and how this channel is really like a community effort, you could say. And so anyway, Jim Majors, stoked to have you here. His link is in the description, everybody, so you can check him out as well. And Jim, what have you been up to at he's just started his new channel, which has a unique name. And so anyway, I'll let you share, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, man, thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you for Standing for Truth, for joining me in this debate. I'm really super stoked about this, but I'm even more stoked about my channel. It's called Disciple of Kairos, and basically I'll be doing the stuff that I debate about, with the exception of tonight for the most part. I usually don't debate on this topic, but James made me. No, I get into a lot of biblical criticism, a lot of textual criticism, just really break down things that people usually just skim the surface of, and just explore things more, get into the internal evidence, external evidence, all the sources and everything, just basically putting all the information out and letting the people decide.
You betcha. Well, we appreciate that, Jim, and so I'm sure it's going to be interesting. So, with that, forgot to say a couple of things. One, if it's your first time here, consider subscribing if you enjoy these types of debates, as we have a lot more coming up. As you can see down in that little marquee, I can almost reach down and grab those little letters out. We are thrilled to have Jake from Hugo and Jake debating this Wednesday against Logan M on whether or not Jordan Peterson has had a good effect, or maybe more harmful effect, on society. That will be provocative. And more than that. So if you have a question during this debate, just feel free to put an @ModernDayDebate in the live chat, and then let us know which debater, or if you want, you can say it's for both debaters, your question is for. We will compile them into a list and ask them during the question and answer session. If you do a super chat, it actually opens it up. You can make a comment towards one of the speakers that they can have a chance to respond to during the question and answer. So in that case, it could be a comment and answer. So last, super chats automatically go to the top of the list. So that's throughout the debate or the Q&A. And with that, given that Standing for Truth is taking the affirmative, we will let Standing for Truth get started. And with that, this is going to be a kind of a hybrid style of debate. So I'll just quick go over the format just so people have an idea. That scared me for a second. Okay, he's just switching over to his PowerPoint. So I thought, I was like, oh no, we lost the picture. So I will let everybody know that we will have 8-minute openings. So this is going to be kind of a lightning type round style. Then 4-minute rebuttals. Then 20 minutes of open discussion or civil discourse. And then we're going to have 20 minutes, or I should say 5 minutes of closing statements, and then 20 minutes of Q&A. So it's going to be a great time. And Standing for Truth, if you are ready, I'm going to set the timer for your 8-minute statement, and then you can start, and I will basically start the timer on your first word.
All righty, just getting your faces out of the way. Just 1 second here. How's that? You can see everything okay there, James?
Definitely.
Awesome. Okay. So thanks so much. Is there evidence for biblical creation? Let's get this going. So the Bible is the history book of the universe. Starting with this as an assumption, we can test the Bible to scientific discoveries and see how well this fits. The Bible tells us clearly that Adam is the father of all people. We read in Genesis 2:7, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. We see no evolutionary history of mankind here. There is not even a hint at fish-to-fisherman evolution in this verse. According to the Bible, we were made perfect and in the image of God. You mean this isn't grandpa? Put a dress on your monkey and take her to the prom, guys. For those suffering from science denialism, if you think you're so vastly similar to an ape, do us all a favor and go find yourself a chimpanzee, dress her up nicely, put some makeup on her, and take her to the prom. See the looks you get and watch what people say about your hot date. A light bulb may finally go off in your head when you quickly realize that she's not so similar to you after all. Now, it's a direct prediction from the Bible and from a literal interpretation of Genesis that we are not related to apes, that we are actually specially created in the image of God, and that's actually what we see genetically. For example, when evolutionists or someone of an opposing worldview says that human and chimps, they're genetically identical by 98 to 99%, that's based on preferential and selective treatment of data. It's cherry-picked data. They're not including non-aligned DNA, gaps, copy number variations, and size differences. When you actually look at what the genetic identity is, it's less than 88%, and that's over 400 million DNA differences that actually exist between the two species. And there's significant DNA sequence discontinuity between the two genomes that evolution cannot explain or account for. Even the claimed human chromosome fusion number 2, that alleged site where the fusion supposedly took place actually represents a highly organized functional gene, and these shared genetic mistakes that you might have heard of as pseudogenes, those are actually now known to be functional DNA elements and not mistakes. You can look at orphan genes, for example. What is the reality? Humans are not apes, and they were created separately and uniquely in the image of God. Not only does the Bible prove this, but so does DNA evidence. Once again, the Bible is the history book of the universe. We read in Genesis 2:21 to 22, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. We started with 2 people, 1 man and 1 woman. These are very significant statements about genetics. Modern genetics has discovered Adam and Eve, Noah's flood, the Tower of Babel, is written in the genome. The evidence for biblical creation is overwhelming. The Bible makes predictions. Looking at the Adam and Eve story in the biblical-based model, we can make numerous predictions. If we only started with 2 people, all the people today should have a low genetic diversity. If we started with 1 million people, you're going to have a lot of genes floating around a population of 1 million strong. But if you only started with 2 people, that really restricts the diversity today. Over deep time, any large population will accumulate enormous numbers of mutations, resulting in enormous amounts of genetic diversity. This is a serious problem for evolutionary theory and those of opposing worldviews, because it is now clear that mankind has very limited genetic variation. This is predicted directly from the Bible, a literal interpretation of Genesis. While the observed low genetic diversity is a massive problem from the evolutionary perspective, this is most certainly expected and predicted from the biblical perspective. From the biblical model, we all come from just two people, Adam and Eve. This obviously means that limited diversity, it's easy to explain. The Bible has predicted this. If the Bible is correct and Adam really is our ancestor, as we just read from the Bible passage moments ago, there should only be one male ancestor of humanity. The small number of mutations that separate modern men from the sequence of Y chromosome Adam indicates that this man lived in the relatively recent past. Based upon the actual observed mutation rate for the human Y chromosome, studies show that Y chromosome Adam lived just thousands of years ago. And these findings are strong evidence supporting the literal Adam of the Bible. And that mitochondrial DNA, the little piece of DNA inherited exclusively from our mothers, that means we can build a family tree of all the females in the world, and there should only be one female ancestor of everyone on Earth today if Genesis is accurate. The small number of mutations that separate modern people from the sequence of mitochondrial Eve indicates that mitochondrial Eve lived in the recent past. For evolutionists and those of opposing worldviews, none of these facts have to be true. All genes should come in two versions since Eve was taken from Adam. We just read that in the passage moments ago. She probably got Adam's genome, except for the Y chromosome, of course. These biblical predictions are all exactly what we find in modern human genetics. What's the chance of the Bible being made up? And the biblical story mirrors what we actually see in human genetics today. Genesis 9:18-19. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. The Bible, as I said before, is the history book of the universe. Further predictions based on the passage we just read. Look at Noah's flood. This story tells us that all people should be closely related. It tells us there should be only a few mitochondrial DNA lines as Shem, Ham, and Japheth's wives, and only one Y chromosome since it's only Noah. His three sons would have inherited his Y chromosome, and we should have significant evidence of rapid population growth. It turns out that this too is exactly what we find in modern genetics. This all did not have to be true. Even more predictions. The Tower of Babel account. We have found a single dispersal of all people in the relatively recent past, traveling in small people groups into uninhabited territory through the Middle East. They call it the Out of Africa story, but these are all biblical-based predictions. I want you to look at this tree. You can find this in the book Replacing Darwin and in the work of Dr. Nathaniel Jensen. This is several hundred human individuals. The tips of these branches represent human individuals. Distance of lines, the very long lines would be lots of DNA differences, and short lines would be almost none at all. What do you notice about this tree? This tree represents various people groups around the globe. Many of these lines come together as three major nodes. This is a fact that evolutionists even acknowledge. These are the three major haplogroups. How much longer do I have, James?
Got a minute, 20 seconds.
There are three major groupings and subgroupings. Length of lines connecting the groups are short, and lines radiating out from the groups are long. Reading scripture, we know our maternal ancestry goes back to Eve. Population would then grow and shrink to 8 at the time of the flood, and then grow again momentarily, ending with the splitting of people groups at the Tower of Babel. One Eve in the beginning. Population then shrinks to 8 people. Noah, Noah's wife, 3 sons, and 3 wives of Noah's sons. 3 boys get their mitochondrial DNA from mom, and then it ends. Genesis 9 says that these 3, the entire world was repopulated. We get our mitochondrial DNA from their 3 wives. The history of humanity is in our genome. What we know about mitochondrial DNA of humans fits the 6,000-year timescale, explains the 3 major haplogroups and the relative differences between pre- and post-flood humanity. We're making testable and falsifiable predictions. For example, the stamp, the tree that I just showed you, it contains the stamp of the history of civilization, the Roman Empire, Persian Empire, and Greeks. And this is just the start of the sorts of studies that are actually being done. Y chromosome, for example, disproves human evolution. It demonstrates Adam. The Y chromosome between humans and apes, it's far too different. We can look to the pre-existing heterozygosity model, pre-existing functional DNA differences, which also makes testable predictions on junk DNA, on what's functional, on what's not. Like I said, all evidence here demonstrates the truth of
Time.
biblical creation. Maybe in the discussion period we can go into a little more details on this, but thanks so much, guys.
All right. So thank you very much for that as we go back to the dialogue boxes. And Jim, very excited for your opening statement as well. So with that, I'm going to set the timer for 8 minutes, and I will officially start the timer on your first word.
Okay. Sorry, I'm muted. Okay. So, suppose you happen upon me on the street. You've never met me before, and I say, "Hey, can I have a minute of your time?" Say sure. And I pull this coin out of my pocket. I then tell you that I'm going to poof it from existence, right in front of your very eyes. I tell you the only way that I can make it disappear is by saying the magic words as it's going into this little hole. I say, "Holy Shazama," and it's gone. It disappears. You can clearly see that it's no longer there. You can see my open palms, but no coin. You verify that, yes, it is gone. Wow. Then I proceed back into the same hole that you just watched, right? You're amazed. Oh my gosh, I pull it back out. This can't be right. Having just seen the coin disappear into my fist, it reappears and I pull it from my fist. Does this mean that you believe I used magic to make my coin disappear? Of course you don't. Even if you're not sure how I did it, you certainly don't concede that magic is real. Like that's not the first thing that you jump to. You might not know how I did it, but you know it's not magic. And it's not. It's misdirection. It's sleight of hand. It's the illusion that I give of the coin disappearing and then making it reappear just as amazingly, or not, depending on how amazed you are. But let's just say that I blew your mind standing for truth, and you are genuinely stumped. And now you have to question and reassess everything that you know about coins and physics and magic and myself, my own limitations as a fellow mortal, knowing what you know about humans. You begin to make excuses and being lenient with certain things, taking liberties that you normally wouldn't take, trying to harmonize magic with reality. Let's say later that you and James are talking about it and you're still in disbelief. You look at James with serious intent and you say, "James, that was magic. There's no other way to explain it." And knowing James, I think I know him pretty well. He'd say, no way, man. Like, look, I don't know how he did that dank coin trick, but I'm pretty sure that we could eventually come to understand how he did it. And Standing for Truth would snap back, say, "No, James, you don't understand. It's not a trick. It's magic, and I know it is. It's the only possible explanation is that Dank Jim Majors is a wizard of the dark arts." It sounds ridiculous, yet this is the exact position that he's taking tonight. It's the exact position being taken by those defending creationism. Standing for Truth and other creationists abuse the results and the efforts of modern science by attempting to use that science to prove that the universe was designed by an intelligent designer, specifically his intelligent designer. And he forces himself, or he is forced to operate and to attempt to understand everything within his own theological framework that he's fundamentally obligated himself to. He's obligated to say, "I don't understand how the universe got here, so this is the only, this can be the only result, it's going to only be the result of my God expressing his divinity." And by making that commitment, Standing for Truth is convinced that science will not ever discover the process through which life originated unless it's his God. He's convinced that there is no other sufficient explanation than God. There's no biological mechanism. There's no cataclysmic chemical reaction in the past. There's no paleoanthropological discovery that would warrant him rejecting his claim that God did it. And people will we'll tell him, standing for truth, I'm not so sure that you have a good reason to believe that God did this. Why are you so unwilling to test this belief? Why are you so unwilling to prod and make sure that it's true? Why don't you apply the same reasoning to this that you would apply to a magic trick? For those who are committed to the pursuit of truth, the gaps in the understanding of what we don't yet understand begin to close. You see both sides of it, and suddenly things become clear. Suddenly it's not what you thought it was. And by sincerely caring about whether or not what you believe is true, you allow yourself to analyze both sides instead of committing yourself to one side and damning the other one of all evidence, of all validity. You're honestly seeking out the answers, and that's what gets us the answers, is honestly seeking them out. But for standing for truth, by not putting his beliefs to the test, he can only see one side. For him and every other creationist, the only possible explanation for the missing coin is actual magic. And as you heard, standing for truth, he made an attempt at intellectually misleading everyone. You see, many people think that he made a very good argument for creationism. He's confident, he's rehearsed, he has a pleasant voice, and he doesn't really say anything that seems to contradict, prima facie. He really seems to know what he's talking about. But what evidence did he give for his God creating this universe? He didn't. He didn't give any, and he won't, because he can't. He will continue to engage in this intellectual misdirection, this intellectual sleight of hand. He has no testable hypotheses for the claim of creation, nor is he interested in proving it in a scientific manner. It's always the aim to first prove the existence of God, and everything else comes second, including evidence. And to say that God created the universe is not a scientific theory, nor is the proposition a framework that you can argue from. No, because the science that you use to make your arguments are a result of men and women before us refusing to be guided by theological presupposition, but by a desire to know what is true. He mentioned the. I only have 30 seconds left. I'm going to go ahead and save the rest of my time for later.
You bet. You bet. Thanks so much. Totally appreciate that opening statement as well. So with that, we will now go to the rebuttals. And as mentioned, this is kind of like a lightning pace. So take a deep breath. It's going to get pretty crazy. We have 4-minute rebuttals, and standing for truth, I've got the clock set. I will start it on your first word.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that opening there, Jim. I got a few things written down. He talked about how it's magic, talked a little bit about analyzing both sides, talked about science. Well, science means to know. How do we know? We test, we observe, we retest, we demonstrate, we investigate, and everything we see, as I've shown in my opening presentation, lines up perfectly with a biblical-based model. And the biblical-based model, taking a literal interpretation of Genesis, what does it predict? I've already shown you a number of predictions there based on low genetic diversity, one Y chromosome ancestor, one mitochondrial DNA ancestor, the 3 major haplogroups, mitochondrial DNA haplogroups that point us right back to Noah's 3 sons and their lives. These all make testable, falsifiable predictions. I mean, we also predict death, degeneration, and extinction after the fall, of course. We would predict that we're going down and not up. We would predict, of course, based on our model of pre-existing heterozygosity, many changes would be seen, and they're due to mutation and natural selection, but they'd be based on adaptive degeneration. And that's actually exactly what we see: death, degeneration, and extinction. I mean, if you think of it this way, we've got a genome of 3 billion letters. If you take out one letter or change one letter randomly, are you going to have a huge fitness effect? Of course not. It's going to have a tiny fitness effect. And in fact, it's like rust on a car. I've said this many times before. It's like one single spelling mistake in a book the size of an encyclopedia. You can't see each spelling mistake. You can't see each rust event, but it's continuous and destructive. And Genesis records a time when people had extremely long lives, and that fits perfectly with what we know about genetics and genome degeneration. I mean, we're accumulating these low impact deleterious mutations. Take that back to a time of least genetic entropy. There's a time of creation, a time of perfection as recorded in the Bible. I mean, it brings me to think about Michael Behe in his new book, Darwin Devolves. He puts it perfectly. Darwinian evolution proceeds mainly by damaging or breaking genes, which counterintuitively sometimes help survival. In other words, the mechanism is powerfully devolutionary. It promotes the rapid loss of genetic information. Laboratory experiments, field research, and theoretical studies all forcefully indicate that as a result, random mutation and natural selection make evolution self-limiting. Darwin's mechanism works chiefly by squandering genetic information for short-term gain. Everything we see in this universe in genetics points us right back to biblical-based creation. So I'm using science. I'm looking at both sides, and you know what? You're not going to take your fish to fisherman by losing information. And everything we know about the change that we see based on mutations, natural selection, acting upon random variation, it fits perfectly from the starting point of a biblical-based assumption. And he talks a lot about magic and predictions, but what about abiogenesis? I mean, there's no evidence whatsoever of non-living chemicals evolving into life, into your first cell, and the genetic code in general is proof positive that if you think that all came about from, say, nothing or natural processes, well, at the end of the day, you're believing in magic yourself. That's why I always say evolutionists, they hope, they dream, they imagine that whales, pine trees, and carrots are all related through common ancestry, because that's magic, because it's contradictory to everything we know about empirical evidence. The genetic code, it has vital editing machinery, and that is itself encoded in the DNA. This shows that the system was fully functional from the beginning, and that's just another vicious circle of for evolutionists. And the genetic code that's almost universal to life on this earth is about the best possible for protecting against errors. Everything we see, like I said, it points us right back to a time of perfection, a time of creation. We see that in the universe with the law of increasing entropy. We see that in genetics with genetic entropy. And I've pointed to some testable predictions as well in regards to our model of created heterozygosity, because sure, it could be an ad hoc explanation that God encoded Adam and Eve and these created kinds with pre-existing functional DNA differences. But if I just ask you the question, did God intend his command, be fruitful and multiply, to be by cloning? And the answer to that is an obvious no. And what you've done here, okay. Thanks, James.
Thanks for your patience on that. I hate cutting in on that, so sorry. Lost track of time in these lightning rounds. But we will now go to Jim Majors' rebuttal. So, Jim, I don't know if you were keeping time. If you were, I can give you the same amount of time that Standing for Truth went over, because I lost track of time there. So sorry about that.
I honestly wasn't keeping track of his time, but I'm good with whatever.
We'll give you like 4.5 minutes, if that works. So that's my guess. So sorry about
that. So using my opponent's own words in his opening statement, he doesn't get, I believe it's his first sentence. If it's not his first sentence, it's his second sentence. I don't want to misrepresent him, but he admits that he is starting with an assumption, and then he proceeds to use science. That's not how you use science. You don't start off with a goal, with something that you set out to prove and then set out to prove it. That is not scientific theory. That's not that's not a framework from which that you can argue from, because it's confining. And that's what's great about science, is that it's not confining. It's about discovery. It's not about containment. If you notice, he will do whatever he has to shoehorn 21st century science into his Bronze Age theological framework. He talks about the Y chromosomal Adam and the mitochondrial Eve. Yeah, he is right. You know, the mitochondria can only be passed down through the female to another female, and the Y chromosome can only be passed down from a male to their son, and that's it. But what he doesn't seem to understand or know is, one, it's been verified that the mitochondrial Adam and Eve are hundreds of thousands of years old, hundreds of thousands of years back, and they coincide with what we believe to be the time that we emerged from Africa. There's a lot of similarities. What we also fails to mention is that not only are they hundreds of thousands of years old, but that they're tens of thousands of years old apart from each other. So not only were they not created, they didn't know each other, because the thing is about a mitochondrial Eve and a and a Y chromosomal Adam, they don't have to be the first one. If somebody's having children and a woman is passing down her, say my great aunt, okay, she's wanting to pass on her mitochondrial DNA. She has a daughter. She passes it on to her. Her daughter has 3 sons and dies. That mitochondrial DNA is dead. It stops with her. It does not go on. Therefore, it is not necessary for either the Y chromosomal Adam nor the mitochondrial Eve to be the first anything. And again, I will reiterate that he makes he sounds good. He's rehearsed his stuff. You know, he knows his script. You know, that's great. I'm glad he's sticking to it. But he has yet to provide evidence that one, creation is real, and 2, that it was his God that created this, and not one of the other creator gods that claim to have done it. How much time do I have left, James?
You've got 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Okay. I don't know. It's so clear that this is not the debate that I thought that I was coming to. You know, he's coming at me with this, you know, Ken Ham chimp gorilla animal kingdom stuff that I haven't even made these assertions, but they're such strong debating points because that is all they have to debate. They can't debate for, so they have to debate against. And with that, I'll give him the rest of my time. I'll succeed it to the Q&A.
You got it. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. And this next portion is exciting. This is actually my favorite part. This is where the debaters will have open dialogue for 20 minutes. So they can engage directly. They are uncaged. So I'll start the timer for 20 minutes. And thanks so much for your questions. We have a ton of questions, and they're awesome questions. So I really appreciate you guys asking them. And with that, the 20-minute timer is set. I guess whoever wants to lead is fine with me. You can take turns, I suppose.
Do you mind if I do, or do you want to? It doesn't matter to me.
Well, I mean, I got a few. Well, I want to say thanks for your rebuttal, keeping it respectful. It's up to you. I mean, I've got I know you talked about science.
Okay,
and
I'll ask you just a real quick question, and then and it doesn't really involve anything else, so you can segue right off that into whatever you want to get into.
No problem. Go ahead, brother.
Whenever you started out, if you don't mind, look back at your script, and I would like for you to tell me when you said that you started off with an assumption. Well, what is the assumption that you start off with?
Well, if we start off with the assumption that, say, the Bible is true and the Bible is the history book of the universe, we can make retrodictions, predictions,
Sure.
Testable predictions actually is what I'm making here as well. So if those are confirmed and those are consistent, say in regards to at least retrodictions, then that's pretty significant proof that, the Genesis story as found in the Bible should be taken literally. In a lot of your other religious books, you're not going to be able to make these accurate retrodictions and predictions. So if I started with the assumption that Genesis is true, but then I couldn't make accurate retrodictions, accurate predictions, that are falsifiable, well, then that's a very good sign that.
What predictions can you make?
Well, for example, we can make predictions based on the fact that Adam and Eve were created with pre-existing functional DNA differences. So it would be ad hoc if that didn't make any testable predictions. But of course, we would say that we'd expect those DNA differences that are encoded into Adam and Eve, into the created kinds, would be functional. Versus, say,
that's what we'd expect, but that's not prediction. What you're doing is you're describing it here. You're giving it body. Just say that we didn't know. All right, say that we have all the knowledge that we do about mitochondrial DNA and everything else that you've talked about. What future predictions can you make?
Well, for example, that is a future prediction, because I've talked to many evolutionists. They'll admit that, max functionality of the genome is maybe 20%, probably more like 10%. But what we actually now know is that at least 80% of, the non-coding DNA, we know that that's transcribed in RNA, which suggests function, and the trajectory of discovery favors genome-wide functionality, not just 20%.
Well, where in the Bible?
That is a prediction. That's a testable prediction, my man. Like,
okay,
how much?
What I'm saying is who is predicting this? Because it's not the Bible. The Bible doesn't predict anything about DNA.
We're making a prediction based on the fact that God, his command to be fruitful and multiply, we're not saying that was to be carried out by cloning. So if you acknowledge that very specific genetic view, the fact that, these design variants that God would have placed into Adam and Eve and the created kinds, we'd predict that those would be functional DNA differences. So we're predicting, contradictory to the evolutionists that say max amount of genome functionality is 20%. We're saying that the vast majority of DNA is functional. We're actually seeing that right now, because contradictory to the evolutionary view, the non-coding DNA, it actually functions much like a computer, and it's but regulatory functions. Yeah, go ahead.
But my point is that your presupposition is the only thing that is you have the presupposition, you have the means to get to your conclusion, and then you have the conclusion that you just got to, and none of those are in the Bible. Those are things that you use not the Bible for, but science for. You can make all those predictions without the Bible. I'm talking about predictions you can make with the Bible. We're talking about evidence for your God creating the universe.
Well, no, it's the Bible as recorded in Genesis that actually tells us that Adam and Eve were the first male and female in existence, and that God created these created kinds. And we can actually see that this is a prediction that flows naturally from Genesis. So if this is a prediction that is actually falsified, then yeah, that prediction based on that pre-existing heterozygosity, that would be false. I'm telling you, you can go in the lab, you can do whatever you have, because you know what, we understand very little of the DNA language, probably less than 5%, since comprehensive knockout experiments on humans, fortunately, it's unethical, they've yet to be performed. So for any evolutionist to say, max 20% functionality, that's premature to make that claim. And we're actually putting it on paper that, this is a prediction, genome-wide functionality.
Okay.
And so far that's
predicting this.
Well, intelligent design advocates have always predicted that. For example, these pseudogenes are now known to be DNA functional elements. ERVs, endogenous retroviruses, are now known to be functional in the placenta and the embryo.
So what you're saying is the Bible isn't doing this. It's you have prophets. Is that what you're saying? They prophesied this?
No. This wasn't a prophecy. I'm talking about intelligent design advocates, proponents, scientists. They've always said, why would we create like a car that's 80% junk? So obviously, if we're created by God, and then we're making the hypothesis that Adam and Eve, based on the Bible and God's command to be fruitful and multiply, was not to be carried out by cloning, we'd expect these functional DNA differences, and that's actually what we're seeing. So they're not these evolutionary leftovers, these genomic fossils.
Okay, well, you know what? And that's not my claim. Like, you're sitting here, you're wanting to apparently argue an evolutionist. That's apparently what you came here for. I'm not arguing for evolution. I'm arguing against creationism. And you have still yet to provide evidence for it, because none of the claims that you made about genetic entropy or any of this stuff has anything to do with creationism or the Bible or your God. And I'm
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt. Of course, if the Bible records a time of extremely long lives, we would expect that looking at our lives now, looking at the accumulating mutation-related diseases, I mean, we see it. It's entropic degeneration on all levels. And we actually see that these low-impact deleterious mutations are degenerating us. And we see that Genesis records a time of increased longevity. That's a direct prediction from Genesis. I mean, how else do you explain that?
No, it's not. Because first of all, the people who Genesis is writing about, it isn't even proposed to be, it's not even written around the time these people were proposed to have lived. So there's that. Secondly,
I don't want you to slap and run. I don't want you to slap and run. The Bible clearly records the ages, and then we see a significant drop off. It's a decay curve, the exact same decay curve we see based on this accumulating damage by low impact deleterious mutations. I mean, you can deny science all you want.
You're right. You're right.
Point of least genetic.
You do see a dive off. You see Methuselah living
to Genesis.
Right, you see Methuselah living that long. You see Moses living, or Noah living that long. In fact, he was like 600 before he started building a boat. Abraham. I mean, all these,
which makes sense, right? Because we accumulated these genetic mistakes, these degenerate,
and you start dropping off, right? Right. Okay. So it's really funny that the low point of that is right around the time that we start having verifiable evidence of life expectancy, because life expectancy has done nothing but go up.
Well, no. That's
yes.
The average lifespan has gone up based on medical intervention, but the maximum lifespan, come on, man, that has not gone up. That will not go up. And we see entropic degeneration on all levels, increased rates of cancer, autism, immunological diseases. It's everywhere. You have to be a science denialist to say any. You see that the ages have dropped off post-flood. You see that actually in Leviticus, that's when Moses put in the law that you can't marry close relatives, because we know those shared genetic mistakes, marrying close relatives, well, that's going to expose the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes, but they didn't have that pre-flood. They didn't have that.
Can you demonstrate anybody in the past 1,000 years, in the past 2,000 years, in it's reported by a historian, whatever, that is said, or that whose lifespan exceeds that of today?
Well, I mean, we have thousands and thousands of legends of the golden age where people were said to have lived to 900, 800, 1,000. We see it recorded in the Bible. That's a historical record.
It is recorded in the Bible. It is recorded in the Bible, and when it is recorded, it is not recorded at a time that these people were to have lived.
See, the thing is, we're making predictions and retrodictions right from I want to mention something which you said about why, because I'm glad that you actually addressed the Y chromosomal atom. So you obviously see if that's true, Y chromosomal atom, mitochondrial Eve, if that's true, you're saying that they're separated, they're thousands and thousands of years ago. But how do you explain, based on the observed mutation rate of, let's just say, the human Y chromosome? Okay. The fact that there's so little mutations and such low genetic diversity between any two humans, max 0.5% different, and that's why the evolutionists have to resort to a bottleneck. So how do you explain that?
There isn't much genetic diversity because we stay to ourselves. I mean, we marry within our own cultures. In fact, in places that we see the most genetic diversity are the places where they have outsiders coming in, where they're actually expanding the gene pool, so to speak.
But the small number of mutations that separate modern men from the sequence of Y chromosome atom, that actually indicates that this man lived in the relatively recent past. You said thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago. So how do you reconcile that without invoking something like a near extinction event?
Because I am not operating on your presupposition that there is genetic entropy, that it's just this perpetual entropy to where we're just like dwindling down to nothing. Like what you understand genetical entropy to be, and what genetical entropy really are two totally different things. Like genetical entropy are things like aging and Alzheimer's and miscarriages and speech impediments. I mean, there's so many, but what it is, genetic entropy.
Well, no. I just want to correct you there real quick before you go on too long. What genetic entropy is the fact that most mutations, they're nearly neutral. So they're unselectable, they're invisible to natural selection. So they accumulate very small effects, and then they accumulate relentlessly. So natural selection, which I'm sure you're aware of, that's going to amplify the best beneficial mutations and get rid of the worst detrimental mutations. But at the end of the day, it can't do anything against the invisible damage caused by near neutral, low impact mutations. So how are you going to solve that degeneration problem if those mutations build up? 100 per person per generation. That's 700 billion new mutations, unselectable this generation alone. So what type of mechanism, what type of selection are you going to use to resolve that problem there, Jim?
What math are you using to come to that? How are you verifying that there's, what did you say, 7 million mutations?
Well, I'm saying that it's widely recognized. You can just Google it. It's
recognized?
It's recognized by the evolutionary community that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per generation.
I'm talking about passing them on, because there's one thing about inheriting a gene that may have not been, how would you call it? I'm not a geneticist. I guess activated, so to speak.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, are you disagreeing with I mean, we begin to add new mutations to, say, our genetic load at the first division of our zygote, and I think it's approximately 3 new mutations every cell division throughout our lifetime. But it's just 100 mutations through our reproductive lines, through our reproductive cells, because your somatic mutations, they're not going to be passed on, say, from your skin cells, for example. I mean, we actually die due primarily to mutation accumulation, but it's the 100 mutations per person per generation that we accumulate. So like my children, they're going to have 100 more mistakes than I have, and my children's children, they're going to have 200 approximately more mistakes than I have. So those mutations are pouring into the population. How do you resolve that? That's perfectly consistent with Genesis.
But no, it's not consistent with Genesis, because Genesis doesn't make that claim. But what I'm saying is, though, Genesis does anything about genetic entropy. Like, you are making that.
Are you saying that the Bible doesn't say that the entire creation grown?
You just talked like a minute straight.
Well, I just don't want you to slap and run, because the Bible does say after the fall, we have now experienced death. By one man, death was brought into the world. Death, extinction. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I totally understand that you have to be able to give answers to the objections, because you're defending that you're the only one defending of you. But just to get a little bit more time from Jim in terms of.
But I want to apologize. I'm just saying, because if my direct predictions and retrodictions are coming from Genesis, and he's saying Genesis doesn't say that, obviously we know after the fall, death was brought into the world by one man, Adam. So just wanted to correct you on that. But go ahead. I won't interrupt.
No, and to me, like, that's not something that I have to account for. That's not something that I have to explain, because I'm perfectly happy with letting scientists and geneticists further map the genomes and further map these Y chromosomes and further understand these, and to be able to sample them more and discover these different mutations, because only by discovering these mutations can we rearrange the family tree. Can we see what that Y chromosome Adam was and where he came from and how we all fit into this. Like, only by doing genetic research can we do that. And there's no genetic research in the Old Testament, bottom line.
Well, we are, for example, there are, like, for example, population geneticists, they widely recognize that human mutation is catastrophic and that man is presently degenerating. They've come up with, mechanisms, say synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism, to attempt to solve the problem. It was an evolutionary population geneticist by the name of Alexei Kondrashov. He actually said, why are we not extinct 100 times over? Because he's recognizing that this accumulation of low impact deleterious mutations, it is a problem, and genomes are devolving and the genome is rusting out like a car. And I know you're not here to defend evolution, but you know what, these evolutionists say we started off as a single-celled organism, multi-celled organism, fish.
Right. And that's the thing, though. Like, I'm not here to defend evolutionism, and you're not here to argue against it. You're here to argue for the creation of the universe.
Which I am. I agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying it's a double whammy. It demonstrates biblical creation, a literal interpretation in Genesis, and it destroys pond scum to people evolution. That's why I love it. evolution's, it happens in the imagination of those who want to believe in it, and at the end of the day, all the evidence points right back to a time of creation, a time of
Sure it does.
perfection. It's devolution, not evolution. That's what we
Sure it does. Going off of your first sentence of your opening statement, if you were operating from a presupposition, because if you're not operating from the Bible, you can look at many texts and you can read genetics, you can read whatever you want into text. As a matter of fact, the older the text, the better. It's a lot easier to read BS into a literary device. The Old Testament's really good at that.
Okay, well,
you can make it seem whatever you want, and that's why there are young Earth creationists. That's why there are old Earth creationists. That's why nobody can make their mind up, because people read into it what they want to read into it.
Okay, let me ask you a question then. Okay, so at least you agree, you think, obviously you've said that it was written afterwards and all this, but at least we agree the Bible does record a time when people had extremely long lives. Okay, so let's stay there. Now, if there were initially, say, no mutation, let's say theoretically, hypothetically, just kind of work with me. Let's just say there were initially no mutations. Wouldn't you expect, Jim, just be honest with yourself, be honest with the evidence, wouldn't you expect the maximal human age to be much longer? Doesn't that just make logical sense, just hypothetically?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay. So if we die primarily due to mutation accumulation, we see there's entropic degeneration on all levels. Thousands and thousands of new mutations, related diseases are added to the database every year. Obviously, if you take that back to a point of least genetic entropy, that makes complete sense. And the Bible report, I mean, but if you're just going to say no to that, then there's nothing more than I can say in regards to that. But if you actually look at the Bible,
but there's not, because I have no frame of reference. Like you're asking me to just presume that these people really were this old, when all evidence that we have from all of written history, like, we know that people don't live to be that old. As a matter of fact, it's pretty common knowledge that the farther you go back, the shorter people's lives were.
Well, actually, for one, I've already said there's thousands of legends of the Golden Age, okay?
I'm sorry, was that legends?
Everything you see in the fossil record, everything was bigger. Everything, I mean, look at the megalodon shark. It was massive. Look at kangaroos were huge, dinosaurs. Everything just points to the fact that we are living in a fallen, degenerate world. Look at life around us. Look at it. The thing is, if you actually look at, let's say when the lifespan of early, biblical characters and their ages are compared in the Bible, since I'm defending the Bible data, even if you don't agree with it, it clearly reveals, you can actually plot a graph with all the ages and the decline. It does reveal an exponential. And that curve can only be described as biological. I don't know any other way.
No, it can't. No, look, entropy is natural. It is natural. I mean, one day our sun is going to implode. One day our sun is going to implode upon itself. At one point, this Earth couldn't survive because it was too hot, and one day it won't be able to survive because it's too cold. And if you're taking the Genesis account literally, I mean, how did plants survive without water when when plants were here the day before water? How did they grow? I mean, we could go into that petty stuff.
Okay, well, if you want to, okay, so you were talking about testable and falsifiable predictions. So I've given you a few based on genetics. If you want to go into, say, for example, say the flood. Okay, so if we're going to look at all the layers, the fossil record, I mean, we can even make testable predictions based on the global flood that's actually been confirmed.
Can we touch on the example that I made?
What's the example you made? Rephrase it.
Rephrase it.
Are you talking about plants on?
We're at.
Are you saying at 20? What's that, James?
Actually, time. So we've hit the 20-minute mark. If you guys want to keep talking more, like, we can. Otherwise, we'll go into closings.
Well, I want time for the Q&A as well. What's the next conclusion?
That's fine. We'll just go in the Q&A.
Or is it a concluding statement?
Still have a concluding statement period from each of you for 5 minutes. I was just asking if you wanted to go longer on the discussion, because I know that it's like, I hate stopping it, but I understand that if you guys are ready for the closings, we can go to that too.
No, that's all right.
You got it.
We can go ahead and go into the closings. I think I can wrap mine into it.
All right. We will have Standing for Truth. Given that he had started, we'll have him start the closings, and then Jim will have the last word in the closings. So, Standing for Truth, I will set the timer for 5 minutes, and I will officially start it when you start speaking.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, James. You know what? At the beginning of my presentation, I put forth testable hypotheses on, the three major haplogroups: mitochondrial DNA, low genetic diversity, for example. The evolutionary community, they resort to, a bottleneck of a near extinction event of 10,000 people to explain the low genetic diversity. It's rescue device after rescue device, but the retrodictions and predictions flow perfectly. They flow beautifully from a literal interpretation of Genesis. And we can even look at the flood. That's kind of what I wanted to go in there. We stuck to genetics, time flew by, that's awesome. But there's plenty of evidence that the earth was once underwater. We see marine fossils on mountains and in landlocked areas far from the sea. Actually, no one's disputing that. And some of these sedimentary rock layers, they actually extend, and Jim might be aware of this, they extend over entire continents or even farther. And the deposition of those layers, they had to have been catastrophic. And we actually looked to a model called catastrophic plate tectonics, which makes testable predictions. That's what I was about to go in there. But these catastrophic episodes from the deposition that we see, it was necessary, or else there wouldn't have been much fossilization. I mean, we see fossils, animals giving birth, fish being eaten. Everything we see in the fossil records suggests sudden and rapid burial. This is just more evidence outside of genetics that confirms a biblical-based model. The debate is there evidence for creation, biblical creation? There's a ton of evidence: geology, astronomy, genetics. I'm making testable predictions. All the observations we see in fossils and geology, they're in accord with the flood of Noah, covering the entire earth just a few thousands of years ago. And the existence of fossils, as I'm talking about here, is proof that it happened quickly, because environmental factors prevent that organism from forming. But if it's covered by sediment and then protected, the fossilization process can start. And we've seen rapidly formed sedimentary layers and canyons at Mount St. Helens, a real-time example. And that's just small scale catastrophe. Imagine the global flood. The scope and scale of the energy produced by the flood is recorded in Genesis. I mean, so many retrodictions and predictions based off Genesis. It's amazing. It's astounding. Think about it. The fountains of the great deep break open as recorded in Genesis. Earth is fractured like an eggshell. The continents are moving vertically, horizontally. Tsunamis drive floodwaters onto the continents. Rain is unending. Geologic catastrophes. And continents are moving at rapid paces through the floodwaters. So according to the catastrophic plate tectonics model that we put forth, the pre-flood ocean crust, it's dragged down into the mantle core. That's called subduction process. This is what I was going to go into with Jim here. The cold ocean crust should still be cold, of course, since this occurred only thousands of years ago, even though it has descended into the deep, hot mantle. And believe it or not, and astoundingly, seismic data from NASA has actually revealed enormous slabs of cool rock under North America, and down in the core itself, which should be warm, is confirmation of flood geology. And I can go on and on and on about evidence in genetics, in geology, in flood geology. There's even been rapid magnetic reversals observed, confirmation of the flood. I mean, the contorted rocks we see, they indicate fast folding of soft sediments. And the plate tectonics I'm talking about, the catastrophic plate tectonics, slow and gradual uniformitarian processes can't explain what we actually see. All the geologic evidence suggests rapid plate tectonics. And the global flood with the vast and unique consequences can easily explain coal, oil, and it doesn't have to be due to millions of years. In fact, they can be formed in months. How much time do I have there, James?
We've only got 47 seconds left.
I mean, there's just so, thanks, James. There's just so much evidence that appears to be a consequence of a sudden, unrepeatable event, a global flood whose waters erupted from interconnected worldwide subterranean chambers with an energy release exceeding the explosion of 300 trillion hydrogen bombs. I mean, just picture that. It's evidence upon evidence upon evidence. Genome-wide degradation is perfectly consistent with Genesis. All modern scientific evidence points to the decay and destruction of an originally perfect design creation. If you're an evolutionist and you have to hope, dream, and imagine that you're going to take your fish to fisherman by losing information, I would refer you back to the quote from Michael Behe from Darwin Devolves in my first rebuttal. I mean, that's all we see. Death, degeneration, and destruction, all expected and predicted after the fall of man, after the fall of Adam. So thanks so much. I'd love to see Jim, come to Jesus. Salvation's easy by faith alone. Seems like a good guy, nice guy. We've had a good conversation. 20 minutes flew by. Great debate, actually. Thanks for inviting me there, James.
You got it. Thanks so much for that closing. And now we will jump over to Jim. So, Jim, I've got the timer set for 5 minutes, and I will start on your first words.
Thank you, Standing for Truth, for those kind words. I appreciate that. I appreciate your amiability during this debate. I'll just touch on what I was going to touch on. I mean, I could start anywhere, but since we're talking about creation, I mean, he's got to be aware that one, there are two different creation stories matched into one in Genesis. There's two different sources. You've got Genesis 1 that starts off calling God Elohim in the very first freaking verse, and then you have Genesis 2, and it's using the Yahweh, and it's and there's conflicting accounts as well, if the land was filled with plants and trees on day 3, then how did they survive if the sun wasn't created until day 4? That doesn't make sense, especially, I mean, if he takes it literally, then he means a literal 6-day creation. And I'm not sure that he's aware what that implies. Did God just make an old earth, an earth with the appearance of looking old? Was it nice and shiny when Adam and Eve got here, and then they just jacked it all up? Like, just I don't know what happened there, but it's I mean, if plants did exist before the sun, for one, and you're on the 1,000-year per day or whatever time scale, I don't know if you know what happens when there's no sun, but it gets pretty cold. I'd feel safe saying it's probably gets pretty close to absolute zero. And as far as the claim about the age of the people, I mean, there's been no skeleton that we've gotten from Ethiopia, from Europe, from anywhere in Africa. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until about 30,000 years ago that people started living past the age 30. And it's verifiable. We can go back 100,000 years plus. I feel comfortable saying 150,000 years. And seeing it go back that far, much farther than I'm sure that my interlocutor believes that the Earth actually is, and I mean it's just a really, really ridiculous claim. And that with that, I'll put the rest of the time towards the Q&A. Thank you again.
You got it. Thank you so much. And we have a lot of excellent questions, so we will try to fly through these as much as we can, and we also only have 20 minutes, and so I'm really sorry with that, but just to respect the debaters' time, we're going to...
you're not hurting my feelings any if you want to go far longer.
You bet. I think that Standing for Truth has a date tonight, and so I don't want to take time away from that. I just made that up. I don't know what it is, but I do know that Standing for Truth mentioned before. That
yeah, I know it's not a date. Come on.
I have no friends. My own wife doesn't want to hang out with me. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think the 15 to 20 minutes we agreed on, roughly questions. If it goes a little bit longer, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
As long as it's okay with you, James.
Yeah, that's okay if we go like maybe whatever you guys are both okay with, but I also want to, I know that you guys are polite, so you might
How about until the questions start sucking?
That's funny. All right, we'll start up. So thanks so much for everybody's questions. Great questions. The Holy Spackle, thanks for your super chat. We'll go through the super chats first. They said, can you give your shave with a straight razor? I think that's for Jim.
Yes, I can. I do shave with a straight razor.
Wow, impressive. Ronald Ndonka, thanks for your super chat. He asks, for James, modern day debate, do you believe God used evolution in his creation? That's a great question. I'll try to be quick. It seems that it's inevitable that there's some degree of evolution, even for a young Earth creationist, with the diversity we would need since the animals would get off the ark to get all the diversity we have today. It seems like even young Earthers need some sort of accelerated evolution. So even though I'm not a young Earther, I'm kind of agnostic on origins, but I would say that it seems that both sides need to adhere or accept the idea that allele frequencies can change in a population over time. So using that definition, I definitely would be, and that's what Jackson Wheat taught me the definition is a long time ago. So thanks for that, Jackson.
I am not a hipster. I know they didn't say at modern day debate, but I just got to say that right now. I will fight somebody.
Did someone say you're a hipster? Oh.
Yeah, no, I'm a real farmer. Okay, I'm not a wannabe farmer.
You've got the most hipster glasses I've ever seen, though. Okay, so next one. Thanks so much for that. Ted in Philosophy, thanks for your super chat. He said, standing, will you debate Aaron? So I think he's referring to Aaron Ra, your rival.
Aaron Ra, my rival. Yeah, of course. I've been stating that I would debate him for a while now. I know even the Film Freeze had an outstanding debate challenge to him. As long as it's an agreed upon structure. I mean, it could even be the same type of structure we had here with Jim here. It can be a couple openings, couple rebuttals, discussion portion. I just want an agreed upon structure and format. I'd prefer it here on Modern Day Debate. I love supporting you, James. Great channel. You're putting out some awesome stuff. I've debated on here, 10 times I think it's been, and I've never had any complaints. So if Aaron Ra wants to debate, let's set it up here on Modern Day Debate and agree to a structure. I think that would be a blast. I think it'd be a good turnout too. It'd be fun for everybody.
Gotcha. We will next up go to, thanks for that super chat, by the way, CI Lobotomy LLC. Thanks for your super chat. They said young Earth creationists are just flirfs with more friends. I don't know what a flirf is, but it doesn't sound good. Standing for Truth. What have you got to say to that?
Repeat that.
They said young Earth creationists are just flirfs with more friends. I think it's something to do with flat Earth. Am I right or am I wrong?
Flat Earth. Well, I mean, I don't see flat Earthers making testable hypotheses like young Earth creationists are. And I think I'm definitely not a flat Earther, by any means. But I think believing that pine trees, whales, carrots, and say T-Rex are related through common ancestry is probably takes as much imagination as one who believes in flat Earth.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I think it's the other way around. I think flurfers are just young Earth creationists who don't travel.
I want to see a map from a flat Earther. That's all I'm asking for is a map. I'm curious.
Oh, it's entertaining if you haven't seen one. They sell them. As a matter of fact, I bought one. I have one somewhere.
I'd hang that up.
It's just a circle, and it's got like the North Pole in the center, and then it has the South Pole. It's the ring around the edge of the ice wall.
Next up, thanks for that. And we have, you better put it on camera next time, Jim. I hope you do.
I'll put it behind me.
Sigifredo Sarabia, thanks for your super chat. They said, if evolution is false and the Bible is true, how old would the world and universe have to be versus rock and fossil dating not going away from Gospels?
So I'm guessing that is a question for me.
Yes, I think so.
I mean, I think based on what we know about mutations are the destroyer and not the creator like evolutionists, want it to be. So you can give the evolutionists trillions and trillions and trillions of years. I kind of like how Frank Turek, he's an old earther, but he rejects, that type of pawns come to people evolution. And even he says trillions of years, you're not going to take your single-celled organism to a well because at the end of the day, all we see is degeneration on a genomic level. So evolution to be false, that type of large-scale evolution, I mean, it can be false in an old Earth. But I think based on what we know about accumulating low-impact deleterious mutations, just like Alexei Kondrashov said, an evolutionary population geneticist, why are we not extinct 100 times over? That proves a young genome, and you could probably directly prove a young Earth from that. Thanks, James.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next, we have Sigifredo Sarabia. Thanks for your second super chat. They said if evolution is true, so flip it. If evolution is true and the Bible is false, who came first, male or female, and what quote-unquote sex did that genome mate with?
Well, that's the thing though about evolution. You know, it's a Homo abiogenesis. I'm gonna mess it up. It's the latest classification that's widely recognized as our ancestor. You know, it's not something that just happens. You know, and Astrolo, whatever it is, I suck at this. I'm sorry, guys. But they didn't give birth to a Homo anything. You know what I mean? Like they didn't just change genus like that. They didn't just pop out and just be like, oh well, this is weird. You know, it was just a you know, it's like the analogy. You know, if you take 10 miles of blacktop and you start with a 1-inch paintbrush and you paint a blue line, and with each brush stroke you add 1 drop of red until you get to the end and it's red. You know, where along there do you say that it stops becoming blue and starts becoming red? Like, where do you draw the line? You know what I mean? Like that's what evolution is. We're talking about changes over a very, very long time, unfathomable amounts of time. Like you think Jesus was a long time ago, 2,000 years? You know, we've been around 50 times the amount between us and Jesus, at least, easy.
Gotcha. Thanks so much.
Actually, if I could just say one quick thing,
Well, they had
I
one
think
more
that's
question.
why I always.
They had one more question. They had one more question.
For super chats?
Yep. And this was.
I just wanted to respond to that one. I'm not saying we're ending the question and answer, but
no, I mean
go ahead.
that person's super chat had a question within it that I didn't get to finish before Jim started.
Question
answering.
within a question. Okay, I get it. Go ahead.
So they said, when did the opposite sex exist? I think they mean like if the first sex pops up, like maybe how long after did the second one pop up?
Well, I mean, what happened, you know, is you had natural selection. People would, well, I mean, at this time, you know, they were choosing mates. You know, we see in the animal kingdom, they choose mates that would benefit them. They're strong, they can provide for them, whatever. And in this case, they were likely smarter. They could use tools. They could maybe they could run faster. Maybe they could provide them shelter. Who knows? Maybe he had fire. Maybe he's like, hey, what's up, baby? Like, I got that hot stuff. You know, and the other guy's like, I can't make fire. I don't know how it was, but it's just something between mate attraction and natural selection, basically.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, Sandy for Truth. If Jim's okay with it, I'm okay with you responding.
Oh yeah. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, just real quick. I think just based on his response, and I appreciate the response. I just, that's why I always say, time is the hero of the story for the evolutionists. Time is the god of the science fiction based religion known as, pond scum to people evolution, because they imagine that all these small scale variations, they're actually, eventually going to add up to make something we don't observe. So it's not observable. It's not repeatable. Like, for example, if I told you that Mary Poppins could fly quickly through the air with her umbrella, you'd say that's a fairy tale, of course. But if I told you Mary Poppins could fly slowly through the air with her umbrella, you'd say that's not a fairy tale. I mean, they're both fairy tales. I mean, you can have as much time as you want. It's not going to take your fish.
Just real quick, you know that you can't observe macroevolution in real time because it takes so long. We're talking about
time. Like, is your god.
We're saying, like, I'm not going, like, nothing about me is going to evolve. Nothing about me is going to change except I'm going to get older. I'm going to get uglier and I'm going to die. But, like, there's nothing about me that's going to evolve in the sense that we know that it is. But my ancestors, my children's children, my children's children, somewhere along the line there will be an observable change that will be because of something that I contributed to, and they will be something different than what I am. And we can look at that in our ancestors just back in Jesus' time. Look how much shorter they were. I mean, yeah, but there's so many. I mean,
well, I mean, okay. Let me just ask you then. Do you have parents?
You just got a quick
no,
just to get through as many questions.
yeah, I do.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. We could probably go on forever.
I hate to cut you off. Sorry about that. Next up, thanks so much for that. And Ronald Midnaka, thanks for your super chat. He said, standing, how do you explain these evolution-believing Christians? Francis Collins, Tim Keller, John Walton, and N.T. Wright, among many others.
Heresy. They're heretics.
I meant to say it was for standing because I said it was for Jim.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was answering for him.
Okay, can you repeat that, James? I thought it was for Jim.
Oh, sorry about that. I totally, like a Freudian slip or something. I don't know. Ronald Madonka, thanks for your super chat. He asked, how do you explain these evolution-believing Christians, such as Francis Collins, Tim Keller, John Walton, and N.T. Wright, among many others?
Well, I think they're just adopting a secondary religion of, say, bacteria biologist type evolution. They're starting from, that belief that universal common ancestry is true, and then they're force fitting it into the clear text of the Bible of Genesis. So, I mean, for one, the theology of theistic evolutionism, I think it's weak. It doesn't flow. When you take it literally as it is and you read it according to that, and like I've shown before, I mean, you can make retrodictions and predictions from a literal interpretation of Genesis. Biologos, one of their top scientists, Francis Collins, I think he headed Biologos and the ENCODE project. But you can watch a debate between Dr. Nathaniel Jensen and one of their top scientists, Dr. Dennis Venema. So they go at it for 4 hours. If you really want to come to a good conclusion and watch that debate objectively, I'd certainly recommend it. Thanks, James.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate it. Next, we have another one from Brian G. Thanks for your super chat, Brian. He says, how do you account for the scientist, Dr. Mary Schweitzer, who is a Christian, who totally repudiates young Earth creationism? Also, she's the one who discovered fossilized soft tissue in dino bones.
Right. So from what I understand, I don't think she ever was a young Earth creation, a young Earth creationist by any means. She's the one who discovered that, and I know that there's lots of reading material you can read about that, papers, books, articles. They're coming up with different mechanisms to explain the soft tissue found in dinosaur fossils, and a lot of it is based on storytelling, hypothesizing, but she's obviously holding on to that primary axiom, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. If she was never a young Earth creationist, I'm not surprised that she's still holding on to her basic worldview.
Gotcha. Next up, the Holy Spackle. Thanks for your super chat. They said evidence, death after fall, timeline, and evidence. I think they're asking for evidence of the death.
For what?
Are they asking for evidence of genetic entropy?
I think that they're asking for evidence of the cause of genetic entropy.
Well, the cause of genetic entropy would be the accumulation of the invisible, the unselectables, the near neutral, low impact, deleterious mutations. And the thing is, we see even, so-called beneficial mutations, the best beneficial mutations, the stronger proponent of evolution can give you, they're all, loss of information, loss of, say, net specificity, even gene duplications, which they will say is their primary mechanism for, that large scale evolution. Those are universally deleterious. And even if you give them, I always say, listen, we don't have to argue all day on a beneficial mutation that adds novel information to the genome. I'll give you 2, I'll give you 3. But 2 or 3, rare beneficial mutations, whether it's a point mutation, duplication, it's not going to offset the many accumulating deleterious duplications, let alone all the other accumulating mutations. It's like rust on a car. It's continuous. It's destructive.
But do
Hold
you
on,
think
there's
that that God created Adam and the people in the golden age with all of these like, to be able to live that long age, and then he just like shut them off, like he basically had a
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's a good. Yeah,
plan or
that's a
something?
good. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, based on the created heterozygosity hypothesis, God encoded these pre-existing functional DNA differences in Adam and Eve, the created kind. So there wouldn't have been any mutations. But after the fall, God removed his sustaining power and allowed, say, things like the second law of thermodynamics, law of increasing entropy, genetic
But he created
entropy,
it though.
because he removed his sustaining power. It was a natural.
one
He
sec.
created them with it and he
They
protected it. So basically, he had it installed in them. It's basically like a self destruct bomb inside of an AI robot, just in case it goes crazy.
they did.
What's nice is you see a lot of redundancy in the genome with backup code. It's almost like through his foreknowledge, based on the fact that he knew we'd
Standing
fall.
for truth.
He's
Forgive me.
actually, put forth a way where we're not just going to degenerate in one
Sorry, James.
generation, but it is the slow
We've
degeneration.
got
Yeah, sorry.
What they just clarified. They said he claims death doesn't happen before Adam and Eve's fall. What's the timeline? I think they mean like what's the timeline of when death did come in.
The timeline. So either he's wondering when will we go as a species extinct, or how long until death was brought into the world before the fall? Is that the question?
I'll read the original super chat and then their addition, and you might be able to put the pieces together. They said evidence death after fall, and then they said timeline and evidence, and then they said he claims death doesn't happen before Adam and Eve's fall. What's the timeline?
So, well, we know we can see that there's death in the universe. We can see that Genesis, if we take Genesis literally, and then we build our model from that, we can see that it records a time where people live to extremely long lives, a time before death, when they're in the garden. So I can't point you historically or observably. I mean, that's the past. We'll have to watch it on a big screen when we die and go to heaven. But as far as today, I mean, we see entropic degeneration on all levels. I think logically you can take that back to a point of least entropy, and that's why at the end of the day our hope is in Christ, because there's nothing fun, there's nothing good or exciting about genetic entropy. There's nothing funny about the increased rates in Alzheimer's, dementia, asthma, autoimmune diseases, horrible cancers. What is it, 1 in 3 now? Immunological diseases. Nothing fun. That's why our hope is in Christ. And you know what? Genetic entropy, it points us to Christ, and it points us to the necessity of a Savior. We're in a dying world, and we need Jesus to save us from that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Then we have Sigifredo Sarabia. He said, if there was no death before Adam, how do you explain mammoths of 10,000 years with structures at similar dates? How did things not die if it's necessary?
Well, it's funny because I have a paper that I've studied where it talks about mammoth populations. They were actually highly inbred, and they carried a very elevated genetic load, which they say likely contributed to their extinction due to this mutational meltdown. So you can actually see plenty of paleogenomic evidence of genetic entropy, even the claimed examples of human evolution, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthal, Homo naledi, all suffered from, what's called reductive evolution. Like, let's say Homo naledi, for example, is a praised example. That reductive evolution, that inbreeding, that went on. And I always say inbreeding, it's like a sneak preview to where we're going as a species genetically. But you see these pathologies, reduced body size, reduced brain volume. And then the dating of it, 10,000 years, based on unknowable, impossible assumptions. But I actually love to use mammoths as evidence for genetic entropy. So I think I enjoyed that question, because that's proof of, yeah. Thanks, James.
You bet. Thanks so much. Sigifredo Sarabia, thanks for your super chat. Here as well, they said, if Darwin's title on the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in struggle for life, is it racist?
Who's
I'm
that?
guessing that one's for Jim.
I think so. They had said,
Can you repeat it? I'm sorry.
they said if Darwin's title of The Origin of Species is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life, is it racist?
Yeah, of course it's racist.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Well, I mean, it at least has racist implications.
You got it. Thanks so much. And next question. Thanks for that, Sigifredo Sarabia. Farouk Assad, thanks for your super chat. They said, how did plants survive before the sun was here?
Okay, so that was the question that Jim was trying to ask at the end there. So so if you actually look in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and then he said, "Let there be light." Well, I mean, he could easily sustain that with his light. And the thing is, the sun creating on another day makes sense because a lot of religions, a lot of cultures, ancient civilizations, they worship the sun. So the way that it's laid out in Genesis is actually perfect because it shows us that we shouldn't be worshiping the sun, and that's why he sustained life, plants, whatever with his light. And we can actually see that the sun and the moon are removed in the new heaven and the new earth, and we're once again sustained by his light. So I think that's a pretty, I think plants, I don't think they even, I'm not an expert at it, but I don't think they need the sun. Their seeds grow under the ground away from the sunlight. So the sun came after one day after plants. I mean, that's either way, it seems like there's an easy explanation for it, but I tend to just hold to the fact that he used his own light. Let there be light, and the sun
There is an
came
easy
on another day.
explanation, and it's that there's two different accounts because, I mean, without the sun, the earth would reach, I mean, absolute zero, which nothing could survive, even for one day. And
Well, his light
sustained it. It doesn't say anything about God sustaining them with his light. That is the first account.
Well, it said, "Let there be light," and then later on it says, "Let there be two great lights in the firmament of heaven." So there's your sun. Afterwards, he sustained it with his light. But one day is still not a problem. I don't see how, because their seeds grow under the ground away from the sunlight, and then the sun came after one day after plants. Boom. Either way, I think it can be explained scientifically or theologically, supernaturally, with the fact that because he's going to sustain the new heaven and the new earth with his light. Why wouldn't he do it in Genesis on the first and second day of creation? I mean, that seems like a pretty theologically easy answer or a scientifically easy answer.
But what he did is he separated the light from the darkness. It doesn't say anything about a sun or anything like that. It just says light. And plants need a lot more than light to grow. It's very much has to do with the sun and the distance from the earth and the amount of radiation that they're getting, and it's everything necessary.
What about Revelation? Okay, what about Revelation and the new heaven and the new earth? He's sustaining it with his light. Are you saying God? I mean, if you don't want to believe the Bible and you look, because I know a lot of people even say, "Oh, Genesis 1 and 2, two separate creation counts," and it's just like the so-called contradictions they come up with. It's hilarious because you actually look for an answer, seek an answer, find an answer. Like, well, that was easily explained. Like I find if you explain
Revelation isn't about the end times. Or Revelation is the rantings of John of Patmos talking about how Rome was going to be overthrown. It was basically his one last screw you guys, basically trying to scare them. That's all that it was him just trying to prophesy the end of Rome, and it didn't happen.
Well, I think if you read Revelation carefully,
I'm so sorry, you guys. I've just had to. I know that you have an answer standing for truth. I'm really sorry, but just to try to squeeze these super chats in really quick.
Yeah, no problem.
So Farouk Assad said it would have been cold since there was no sun at all, namely before the. So. Thanks for that super chat, Farouk Assad. And if you want to respond,
it's not really a good point because he's sustaining it with his light, just like in the new heaven and the new earth. There's no sun, there's no moon. He's sustaining it with his light. He's God. He can easily do that.
Come on, have some humor. Sun, the sun, Father, Son.
Oh, what did he say?
I don't know if they.
You pulling a fast one? Okay, go on to the next one.
I think they meant cosmic sun, but that's all right. Sigifredo Sarabia, thanks for your super chat as well. They asked, how many push-ups for a fish to leave a fishbowl? Thank you for that super chat. We appreciate that. Good to see you here, Sigifredo. And last, DB Cisco asks, what makes your ancient creation story better than all the other ancient and modern creation stories? Thanks for that super chat, DB.
Well, I think the fact, because everything we see in reality, everything we see in empirical evidence-wise, I mean, points us to Genesis. That's why you see everything in regards to, Y chromosome atom, mitochondrial Eve, the fact that, we observe low genetic diversity. All of these things have to be explained away by the evolutionists with certain rescue devices, right? Like a population bottleneck, for example, to explain it's all storytelling. And you know what? Modern genetics has actually discovered Adam and Eve, Noah's flood, the Tower of Babel. It's written in the human genome. You can either accept it or just be a science denialist and go to your confirmation bias, go to your rescue devices. Your other religious books, they can't make these types of retrodictions. They can't make these types of predictions. Even the first sentence of the Bible, Genesis 1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. That indicates that God created the universe outside of time, matter, and space. The first law of thermodynamics states that matter can neither be created nor destroyed. They used to believe in the steady state theory, universe is eternal. Bible's been right all along. It says God stretched out the heaven and the earth. We know space is expanding. I mean, everything we know about science confirms Genesis. Show me another religious book that you could say that about.
According to the Enuma Elish, it's over 10,000 years older than the earliest book in the Old Testament, and it actually says that that Marduk is the supreme god. So does that mean that's what it is?
Are you saying that religious? Are you saying that religious book was written before Genesis, before the Bible?
Yeah, absolutely. It's written in cuneiform. It's pounded into clay.
I think it's pretty obvious that all the legends you see, Babylonian, all these different religious books, they all come from a common source, and that common source is the Bible. All these other legends you see.
No. That is the common source.
No. I'm right on that one.
Give me one
No,
second.
you
sorry.
definitely are not.
RIGHT.
Forgive me 1 second. We've just last two. These are late, and then we're gonna wrap up for sure and really quickly because standing for truth. I appreciate you being so patient. Jim has died. Jim, we hope you come back. Basically, Movie Theory said, you heard it right, folks, evolution is racist. I hope you don't mind Movie Theory if I combine your super chats. They said, is Aaron Ra afraid to come to a neutral platform where his atheist friends can't help him by jumping in a debate? Thanks for your super chats, Movie Theory. Let's see, I guess the first one on racism would be addressed to Jim. Jim's back, he's alive. I don't know, but Jim kind of agreed with that. I don't know if you want to say anything, Jim, you can.
What was the question again?
He said, you heard it right, folks, evolution is racist.
No, I wasn't saying that. What I guess I should rephrase it. I'm saying that people have taken that title and they have used it for racist things, much like people have taken like Norse mythology and used it for racism or nationalism, something like that. It's taking advantage of something and using its authority to your advantage.
Gotcha. Thanks so much, and we appreciate that super chat, Movie Theory. And then the last one, I don't know if this would be for standing for truth.
What was it about the Aaron Ra not wanting to come on a nonpartisan platform?
That's what they had asked.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious to anybody that modern day debate, James, what you're putting forth here is neutral, it's nonpartisan, it's fair. You're great at communicating. I mean, you send several emails, few days, week in advance, confirming the format, confirming the structure, making sure both participants are happy and content. Aaron Ra, I think a lot of these atheists that like to maybe go on non sequitur and it's kind of a free for all. Maybe they are hesitant to come onto a nonpartisan platform like yours, but I would certainly welcome them, and I think they would enjoy it. So if Aaron Ra wants to debate here, I think that would be fun. And I said it before, let's get her going. So thanks, James.
You got it. Let's see. This is like really quick. We just had 3 super chats. Okay, please. I'm so sorry, everybody. if anybody wants to host an after show, by the way, I will plug it. I will put the
Yes,
link.
please.
If
Somebody please host one.
Okay, so whether you're an atheist, Christian, we don't doesn't matter to us. If you want to host an after show, that's fine with us, and we will put the link in the description and announce it on the channel. So let me know if anybody does want to do that, because that might be a chance where I can even send you the questions, because I just want to respect Standing for Truth, because like I do know, he's got a family, and so it's kind of like I feel terrible like keeping him. Really quick, if you're okay with me just reading these really quick. Brian Stevens said evolution can be wrong and God doesn't have to exist. If you want to give like a 25-second response to that, Standing, if you're okay with that.
Sorry, brother. Can you repeat that real quick, James?
Brian Stevens said evolution can be wrong and God doesn't have to exist.
Well, I love when people say that, like, oh, hey, you're arguing against evolution, and that doesn't prove creation. It's like, well, what's the alternative, for example? And the thing is, if evolution isn't true, but yet everything we see, say everything that I presented in the beginning, as in regards to the three major mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, we're even making direct. 8 minutes didn't give me a whole lot of time to present everything, but we're even making direct predictions on absolute mitochondrial DNA differences, and it's actually consistent with a 6,000 year time scale. And evolutionists have over predicted the amount of DNA differences by a lot, by a landslide, and they're going to have to make testable predictions now to explain that away. And young Earth creation scientists have made successful predictions and retrodictions. So yeah, evolution's true. Okay, let's pretend or let's say evolution's not true. Let's pretend it's not true. Now let's look to the Bible. We're still going to come up with these accurate retrodictions and predictions. So either way, creation wins.
Oh, I must have misspoke or something. People are chewing me up in the chat. I'm not sure what I said. But no, but the Enuma Elish is older than the Bible, and the Babylonian religion is definitely older than the Canaanite religion is older than the Israelite religion. That's where the Israelites came from. They didn't come from Egypt. They came from Canaan.
Gotcha.
Well, no, I would say that that's just a baseless assertion. If you actually read all the religious texts, you can see that they're embellished, and you can see that they all clearly come from a common source. For example, all the hundreds and hundreds of flood legends you get around different civilizations.
Hold on 1 second. Okay, so sorry. I just want to keep on moving. Please forgive me. I know that you. One really quick. I'm sorry, Standing for Truth. Dragnocht Silvis he'd offered to do an after show, just so everybody knows. His channel will do an after show. I'm about to link his channel in the description for this video, and then if anybody else wants to do an after show today or tomorrow, just let me know. I'm really seriously sorry we didn't get to questions. We even had somebody email a question like an hour before the debate was scheduled to start, and so I'm sorry, but just to respect Standing for Truth, like his time, we were going to send the questions to Dragnocht, so if he wants to go through some of the questions, he can do that. Like, I'm seriously sorry about that, friends. Like,
if you want to send them to me, I mean, if that's okay with him, I'll go over them or whatever.
That's totally okay with me. I will send the questions to Jim and Dragnocht in case either of them wants to go through any of the questions. Like, I'm seriously sorry, guys. I didn't plan for it to be like that. Let's see. Really quick, I think we had one more. Two more. DB Cisco said, I agree, Genesis is nothing but stories. I guess that's for Standing. If you want to respond to that, Standing, you can, as long as it's like 25 seconds if you're okay with it. Sorry for keeping you over your time.
No, yeah, you could just go through the super chats. I know they paid money to do so go ahead, read through them.
Dragnocht Silvas says, explain the falsification criteria for creationism. I think that's for Standing. If you want to respond, you can. If you want to leave, I totally understand, because you already have stayed past your promised time, and I know that you did. I think I'm under the impression you promised your family that you spent time with them.
Dragnocht can go out and actually test the model for himself. He can go measure the mutation rate in the Khoisan peoples. The click speakers of I think it's Southern Africa or whatever, they haven't been measured. And Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, he's made predictions on it based on the measured mutation rate that he used to calculate the absolute differences in mitochondrial DNA and in species. And then evolutionists so far, they've made inaccurate retrodictions, predictions. They've over predicted the mitochondrial DNA differences. They've under predicted the nuclear DNA differences. We've actually it fits perfectly in a biblical based model. Fits a 6,000 year time scale. The mitochondrial map that I showed earlier in my opening
25 seconds.
Go look at that. Test on that. Yeah, no. I'm just saying he can easily go test them and falsify. He can even go he can go in the lab and test for DNA function. I mean, I could go on and on about that, but thanks, James.
Thank you for staying later than promised. Thank you everybody for being here. Seriously sorry about not getting to all the questions. We are going to send them over to both Jim and Dragnoct, and we're also linking Drag. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how he's going to get my email and stuff. I don't know if you want to give that to him or.
Yeah, I can definitely. I can do that. So I will link that in the description. Want to say thanks everybody for being here. We know that there are a lot of channels out there, so we appreciate you spending your time here. Hopefully, we try to be nonpartisan. Hopefully, I'm just as hard on either side. And we really appreciate you being here. Whether you're a Christian, atheist, we just want to let you know, no matter what your view is, we love that this isn't an echo chamber. Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that channels that are atheist channels or Christian channels are like echo chambers. I understand that they have guests on or they address arguments from the other side. But my point is just that I love that we kind of have the interaction here of Christians and atheists, like, challenging each other in live time. And so, as well as in the comments and the super chats, everything. So we appreciate that. And with that, keep us honest. Always call us out if we make a mistake. And I'm putting Dragnoct's link in the description. So thanks for that. We appreciate both the speakers as well, who are both linked in the description. So highly encourage you to check out the speakers in the description. And with that, speakers, thanks so much for being here. We totally owe you and appreciate it.
Thank you, James, and thanks, Jim. It was fun. It was respectful. It was a good time. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, I had a good time. We'll have to do this again.
Thank you, guys.
Sounds good to me. Guys, have a good night.
Take care.